Hey, boo boo. We're gonna go steal Ranger Rick's picnic basket. We gotta take all the chickens from it. What are the humans doing?
Do you think you're ready? Can you handle the truth? Or are you in denial and demanding more proof? They demonstrate in real time how they're spinning you lies, but no one pays attention, no one opens their eyes. They walk around like zombies with their head in the mobiles, signaling their virtues with a pick on their profile. Yeah. Signaling their virtues with a pick on their profile. So if you think you're ready, you don't need more proof. Conspiracy deniers are denying the truth. They fabricate our problems and pretend to provide the best solution, but we all know they lie. They lied about the weapons and they lied about health. They lied about the fact that they're transferring the wealth. You should really notice how they're pushing the fear. Keep everybody terrified and not thinking clear. Yeah. Everybody's not thinking clear. Keep everybody terrified. Yeah, and nothing. Keep everybody terrified and not thinking clear. When you do, you realize that this is their trick. It's getting really stupid now, they're taking the mic. Said, do you think you're ready? Can you handle the truth? Or are you in denial and demanding more proof? They demonstrate in real time how they're spinning you lies, but no one pays attention, no one opens their eyes. They walk around like zombies with their head in the mobiles, signaling their virtues with a pick on their profile. Yeah. Signaling their virtues on their profile. Hey.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Chilling with Sasquatch, where tonight I'm going to expose you to an apocalyptic wasteland of absolutely lush and verdant regions. When you walk out into the eastern woodlands and you look across those vast green mountains covered in oaks, red oaks, white oaks, water oaks, scrub oaks, you name it, there are millions and millions of four species. This is not a natural distribution. This is a very unnatural situation. Much as I've said about the bison of the Great Plains, this doesn't look like a place people would live. It looks like a place that's been invaded by invasive species. Because pre-Columbian cloud forests of the East were very different than they are now. Previously, before the Columbian contact, apparently the effect of the Viking contact or the Irish contact, if you believe that particular tall tale, hello tales told in the dark. I'll get to chat in just a minute. But there was a single mass apocalypse that took place not long after these settlers, not settlers, the original immigrants from Europe started coming over. It wasn't very long indeed after Columbus himself showed up, and it's possible he may have introduced some of the vectors that led to this apocalypse. What's up, New York Outcast? Good to see you, bud. So there was this guy, I believe his name was Cabeza, or Cabeza, perhaps. He was a Spanish conquistador type, and his ship crashed not long after the 1492 contact. And when he crashed on Galveston, a handful of his folks survived, and they marched back to Florida and then used eastern hardwoods to build them a ship to get home. And it worked. And the reason it worked, and we have some of the diary entries from his ship's priest, who apparently survived most of the journey, if not all of it. They had very little issues finding food on their way back, and they didn't run into very hostile tribes. Only one that I remember, and it's been years since I read the account, but only one tribe actually gave them an issue on the way back, and it was one of the Mississippian and unnamed Delta tribe. They never went close enough to find out why they didn't like people. They just went around. So when they get back to Florida and take back off to Spain or Italy or Portugal or Madrid or wherever it was they were from, he comes back with this account of having crossed what is nothing less than an actual Garden of Eden. He talks about there being edible nuts on the trees year round, the whole way through. He's talking about Middle Texas at points here. You know, he's coming from southern Galveston, and you don't go up the coast in that region. It would make the trip 300,000 miles longer than it is necessary to be, right? So this tale of this ship's crew that crossed most of the southern U.S., including the Mississippi, so it reads like a fairy tale, sort of. They had hard times. Some people got sick, and some people died, and some people were killed by pigs. And I think one dude got mauled by a bear, although a lot of people want to point to that account and call it Sasquatch. But essentially what they tell you is a story of a lost Eden, a garden that had been tended by the natives for no less than 10,000 years. Since the middle of the last ice age, perhaps, natives had wandered through the cloud forest of the eastern U.S., and they had burned anything that wasn't useful or was in the way of something that could be useful. They would cut it down and use it for something else where it would be useful. But only the useful plants were allowed to propagate unmitigated. And if you don't know, the only use for an oak is shade and wood. Very few things actually eat acorns without the specialization to do so. The tannin content in most bitter acorns is far too high. And there's an interesting analogy here to a culture that exists in the Iberian Peninsula, where they make a very unique type of prosciutto. This is a dry-aged meat, not entirely unlike something between salami and bacon, more bacony than anything else. They do an Iberian ham, and these pigs are fed something called sweet acorns. These are oak trees from acorns from oak trees that have been selectively bred for the past, we know, 2,000 or 3,000 years to remove as much tannin from them before they drop. And they're called sweet acorns. In Georgia, North Georgia, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, there are acorns up there virtually identical physically and tannin content wise to these Iberian oaks, but they are of a totally eastern species. I believe they're a type of red oak, which is typically a high tannin oak. When you hear about the Native Americans eating acorns, they're not talking about the scrub oaks out there in the swamp that you see there today. Because 500-600 years ago, those scrub oaks would not have been there. There would have been one huge oak, and it would have been kept because it was useful to someone somehow. Otherwise, some local tribe would have girded it, burned it, and dropped it, and used it to build a boat or or a table or a freaking longhouse or something, right? So when you talk about the pre-Columbian forests, whether it's North America or South America, you can still see the evidence of this long-term tending by not just one culture but multiple cultures across vast sections of Blue Ridge Mountains. When you go up there and you look, you see this monoculture of nothing but oaks, a few laurels, a handful of cedars and pines, but it's predominantly oak trees. There's a few beech, a few hazelnuts. You've got a handful of Chinese chestnuts. But what is missing from all of this are two things. One, the elimination of the understory almost entirely through fire. Two, the protection of specific useful trees in specific useful locations for whatever use it might be, whether it's a sweet acorn or whatever. And the biggest apocalypse of this whole debacle was the American chestnut tree. When you talk about whether or not there can be a Sasquatch, an actual Bigfoot, a giant freaking ape man wandering around in the woods of North America, and you tell me that is absolutely impossible, I say yes, maybe today. 500 years ago, that was not the case. These gentlemen who marched from Galveston to Florida spoke of never going hungry. They had a few hard times where some of their stores were flooded by a major flash flood. And another case where one of their canoes tipped over and it like messed up some of their drinking water. And other than that, they speak of eating a dozen types of nuts for virtually every meal. They also hunted the extremely abundant game, so abundant that they used rocks and not muskets to bring them down. And the reason the game was so abundant, the reason all of these things worked together the way they did to leave a paradise, was because there was so much nutrient energy in all of the trees. Nutrient energy that is stolen from the land today. We do not have a replacement for the American chestnut tree, for the expanse of the beech that's been removed, right? It's an absolute apocalypse of food, and it took place in only 150 years. I mean, we go from such a plenty that there were thousands of tribes, millions of people all up and down the Blue Ridge Mountains, to a handful of diseases being introduced into the native population, followed by the American chestnut collapse, which the killing of the Native Americans in that time period led to the lack of care for the food forest in general. There weren't as many people, so there weren't as many people taking the little steps every year that make it so bountiful, doing different types of slash and burn techniques to keep the forest fire problems under control. Not just for forest fires, but because you cannot hunt in a scrub oak forest. You can't shoot an arrow through an underbrush understory. It can't be done. So in order for these tribes to be able to hunt the meat needed to feed the people they had to feed, they had to keep everything cleared out from under the understory so that they could see and hunt. Let me get the chat. I've already gone completely off base. Hold up. There's things going on over here. Let's do this right. Okay. We have Workline, who's got the gold this evening. It's good to see you, bud. Snarkin' Sass gets the silver. And John Denicola gets the bronze. Welcome to the show, folks. Good to see you. Danny Staten, do you understand what I'm saying about you living in a vast apocalypse? That the beauty that you see in your backyard that is stunning is an artificial artifice of lack of management. Ryan Holzinger, Ryan Holzinger is in the room. Sewer Dog, the Patriot 420. Welcome in, bud. Good to see you. Scooby Doo. Willow. Hello, family. Listening. Wow, something. What did you say? What is that? Do right. Do right. All right. So if my sounds go all batty, let me know in chat because it's already happened twice in like the last 2 hours. My sound mixer just it goes ham, and I don't know why. We've got Tales Told in the Dark. Now, that individual there may very well have some interesting content in the mix. We shall see. What are we doing here? Stop glitching. Oh my God, this thing is totally going to melt down on me. I can see it happening. Blue Unicorn is mountain fresh. Absolutely. New York Outcast, good to see you, bud. Have you considered doing an interview with me, man? I had your email. For the life of me, I cannot find it. I can't. I don't know, man. I just don't know. John Eagle, you too, man. You know you're always invited in for a show if you want to. I would try to interview Blue Unicorn, but I'm afraid I would get a headache and give up. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that. What's up, Anon Mouse? It's good to see you, bud. Heather Holt, Mod God Extraordinaire, has entered the building. Y'all better be careful on your P's, Q's, and C's, baby. Ooh. All right. I think we've caught up with everybody. If I missed you, say something in chat. I'll holler out at you and whatnot. Now, before we get into the whole American, see, the American chestnuts just recently, they've started actually doing things to try to propagate the American chestnut tree. And here's the weird part. The American chestnut is not extinct. It's not even endangered. The nuts simply rarely exist. So the only American chestnuts that are currently producing actual chestnuts exist out west, like out where Heather Holt is, out that way. I think there's like one in North Georgia that's literally protected by a 12-foot tall fence, and nothing is allowed to grow within like 1,000 yards of it or some shit. Like, it's crazy. But it's because the disease that they get doesn't actually kill the tree. It kills the dermis, or the, what is it called? The phylum of the tree. It's like a rust. Hey, Toe for Life. Welcome to the show, bud. Good to see you. So by the way, if anybody can remember the After Dark that Toe for Life was on screen, I've got like 2 of them and I can't find either one of them. I need his picture. That's that freaking shot of him in that damn cowboy outfit for my intro, and I can't find it. So if anybody happens across it or remembers which episode that was, let me know, because I lost it and I can't find it no more. I don't even have it in. I had it in one of my old intros, but I can't find that intro either. I've updated everything past it and now it's gone. I don't know, man. All right, let's do Captain Curmudgeon right quick before we move too far.
He was supposed to deliver, and everybody had to go scrambling to find a backup excuse they could use to impeach him. And the best thing they could come up with was that stupid phone call with Zelensky. For the first couple of days, it was hard to tell exactly what high crimes and misdemeanors they were actually impeaching him for. All we got was a cavalcade of butthurt State Department bureaucrats crying and moaning about how they gave Trump a big list of talking points to use that he promptly ignored or threw away. And the indignation on their part was palpable. What does this guy think he is, the president? This is unconscionable. We are the deep state. The president is supposed to work for us. This aggression will not stand. It wasn't until the 3rd and 4th day when the impeachment managers and their cadre of lawyers finally settled on what they were actually accusing Trump of. So that's when they started telling us that the most loathsome, crooked, depraved thing you can ever do in politics is to investigate a potential future election opponent. They never really explained how that amounts to a high crime on par with treason and bribery, because of course they didn't. And then the Democrats themselves began engaging in the exact same behavior they had just used as a pretext for a presidential impeachment. But hey, You don't get anywhere in Democrat politics by being self-aware or intellectually consistent, just like you don't get anywhere in Democrat politics by being a straight white dude. Hi, Mayor Pete. No, the way you advance in Democrat Party politics is by lighting your hair on fire and shrieking at the top of your lungs about how bad the orange man is. And if you're looking to have a bit of fun at the expense of your Trump psychosis complex suffering friends and family, when you see them celebrating and high-fiving each other over the fake Trump indictment, just for a second, I want you to feign ignorance and ask them, I really haven't been keeping up with all that. What are they charging him with again? Because there is a 138% likelihood they don't have the faintest idea. So go ahead and let them fumble around for an answer and make fools of themselves, because they totally will. Even well-informed legal experts are having a very hard time explaining how the thing Trump is accused of doing is even illegal in the first place, and much less worthy of a hilarious 34 felony charges, but it isn't, and it's not. Myself, I still think Trump should have handled this thing Fort Apache style. You're going to have to come and get me, boys. I'm making my last stand. I still think it would have made for extremely riveting television, but nobody asks me about these things, so what do? I know that's the thing we're all supposed to be talking about today, but my views on the matter aren't really any different than they were last Tuesday when I did a whole video about it, and you fine people don't come here to listen to me repeating myself incessantly. But I did note with some amusement a couple days ago when some idiot on ABC News dragged out that old reliable trope that says, well, if you utter the name of George Soros, then you are engaged in anti-Semitic dog whistle hate speech, which is their fun way of saying, we really don't like the way this narrative is going for us. We are fake news. We know we are fake news. We know the things we say are intellectually indefensible nonsense. And we know we have no other recourse but to try and shame our critics into silence by smearing them as bigots or istophobes. Welcome to ABC World News Tonight. I do have something interesting for you today, though. A story from presidential history that proves on a couple of different levels a fact that you often hear me assert, that there is absolutely nothing new under the sun in politics. Jim Eagle, hit the music.
Absolutely. That dude tickles me to no end. You don't necessarily have to agree with him to laugh straight at him. It's good stuff to me. All right. So before we get off into this, we're going to finish.
All right,
this,
y'all.
just a
So
little bit. These guys are really cool. I'm going to explain this whole thing in a minute. But first, Ryan posted something back here I want to cover. That's what I was just fixing to say. It's not the American chestnut that has gone extinct. It's not extinct. In fact, like I said, it's not even actually endangered as a species issue. The issue is there are no mature fruiting chestnuts, and so it is essentially extinct due to the fact that it cannot reproduce. It cannot produce sexually, so it can't expand its gene pool. It is doomed to be extinct unless we can do something to change that outcome. We have to, and it sounds sketchy, either through selective breeding, which could take 3 centuries, or through CRISPR type technologies. We have to introduce either a Chinese variant of the chestnut that is suitable for consumption in North America, or revitalize the American chestnut population. And if by some miracle, right, the ability to introduce something that is, I guess the opposite of virulent, I guess it would still be virulent, that would attack the disease attacking the plants, so that you could go around the Americas and inoculate all of the existing trees, then it's possible there could be a full recovery of the biodiversity of the chestnut trees. And you would be utterly stunned by the amount of just wildlife that springs forth from that immediate nutrient bloom. It's better than an algal bloom and a cold water current for fish. I mean, it is insane. because not only would they immediately spring back within like 5 or 10 years, you would have crops of food that deer, elk, bears, just about anything that wanders the forest and can fit its wormy little lips around the chestnut ate the chestnut, not just, deer. It wasn't just sheep, think about the eastern bison. These guys wandered through the forests of Blue Ridge Mountains. What do you think they were eating? Do you think they were like grazing or browsing, just general stuff? What were they doing? They waiting for the blueberries to come in the season or something? I mean, because no, they're eating nuts, pecans, walnuts, chestnuts, you name it. And then there's things like pawpaws and whatnot, which is like another one of those really weird fruit that exist, or persimmons, another one. The persimmons, the American persimmons are typically bitter, but not all of them. There are very old persimmon trees out there that are sweet persimmons. Very same landscape. So, right, there are entire organizations working on trying to do a blight resistant American, and I fully support that whole concept. I love it. I love it. I love it. Absolutely amazing. And I scream those people's pride every day, man. They're doing the real work, because you can pretend that you're trying to keep places natural by creating more national parks and giving them more DNR service agents or whatnot, and doing more controlled burns. But if you're not actually managing the actual trees in the park, because not all trees are created equal. Some are useful, some are not. Some are poisonous. Certain types of pine trees or cedar trees will completely decimate everything under their canopy. So you can't plant cedar trees in places where you want to grow things, because they literally poison the ground beneath them. Certain pine trees drip sap on everything underneath them, much like Roundup. I mean, it's like gasoline or something on the ground. It's serious. But it also creates an environment where the fires burn much hotter, so that things like huckleberries and dewberries and gooseberries are completely eradicated when a fire comes through, instead of just being, pruned back a little bit by the flames. That's another feature of this weird alien landscape we find ourselves in, So I'm going to start off with a little bit of light, some light conceptual design here. These folks are in Texas. The name. Hold on. Let me do the thing, just so we know where we're at and everything. 2022 Survival Food Forest Tour. These folks have been working on this forest that they have built. They have 400 fruit trees on 2 acres, which sounds a little bit too close together to work. But if you set things up on a timed scale, you can layer plant trees so that the ones that need more shade are planted later. So like you would initially plant your nut trees, your pecans, your walnuts, these things. And then later you would come in and plant blueberries and whatnot up under the understory. What's up? That's Toe. Hey, Toe. How you doing, bud? That took a second. You almost got me. I was fixing to start gushing. Now I'm going to start gushing, because did y'all know that Sasquatch loves hairy nuts? Well, let me tell you, that is the sexiest man on the West Coast. He cooks too. That's a dangerous combination. I'm going to go and steal one of his hairs and grow my own hairy in a bottle.
Welcome back to the channel, and for any of our new subscribers, a little bit of background. We're a large family of 8. We strategically relocated to Texas 8 years ago. Approximately 4 or 5 years ago, we started developing our infrastructure and what I like to call our food 401k, or our food forest. And I'm in the back food forest, and I just wanted to update y'all. For all y'all that's been following us since the original OG days, thanks for watching. But I want you to see what we've been able to accomplish here in 4 years, not knowing anything, not having ever planted anything in our entire lives. And Texas Mom, she'll do all the garden stuff. I'm showing you the food forest stuff because that's kind of the stuff I do. We first planted our front zone, which we'll show you that too. This is our back zone where we collect water and we use lots of creative ways to redistribute it. We use an enormous amount of mulch, and we've been doing lots of food experiments back here.
Also, there are very, very few critters out there that can eat the seeds of a pine tree. These squirrels that are chewing down those pine cones are doing it because they're starving, bro. They are. So for a squirrel to eat an acorn, a standard like high tannin acorn that you find, these acorns are high tannin to prevent animals from eating them. Your average acorn isn't edible. Okay. So in order for a squirrel to eat the acorn, he either has to catch it while it's still slightly green and hasn't developed tannins yet, which is still a questionable meal at that point. Or, right? What's up, D. Johns? Or he has to take the finished nut, bury it in the ground somewhere for months while the tannins work off and off gas out of the skin of the nut, which doesn't necessarily render them tasty, but does render them non-kidney like burning. It won't kill you to eat them, right? So as you can imagine, squirrels that live in areas where there still are sweet acorns tend to be quite a bit floofier than the squirrels that don't, right? Same for the deer. What's up, Light Up Your Life? Good to see you, bud. Wow. I'm honestly, man, that's 3 times better than most people do, honestly. Or maybe my math's wrong on that, but it's close. Right. So, okay. So if you, right, Blue Unicorn's correct. If you want to eat acorns, right, what you do is you take them, you crack them, first you parch them so that they crack. Once they crack, you pour water into the pot, and as they boil, the casings will come off fairly easily because there's a tiny bit of oil between the shell and the actual meat. You remove all the casings, you get all the stuff out that's not acorn meat, and you then make a mush out of it, and you add a different change. Well, you boil it in 2 changes of water for several hours, 2 or 3 changes of clean water for several hours. And then you make a paste out of it, dry the paste, grind the dried paste into a powder, put it in a package, and they ate it by the handful, mixed with some like prairie sage and various other spices. But they weren't real heavy on spices. So can you imagine having to eat that crap walking across the open plains over yonder? I mean, think about it. When Cadaveza comes across the lower U.S., he talks about a verdant tropical paradise that, has food as far as the eye can see. But when the folks come through the Oregon Trail, they starved. These were 2 totally different landscapes in the same area, less than a couple of hundred years apart. It's absolutely stunning, the amount of biodiversity that was scalped right off the top of North America. And I assume, I don't know, but I assume if you look in South America, you will find a virtually identical process currently taking place where the effort. Oh yeah, no, I know who you are. My bad. I'm sorry, dude. I knew that when I saw it, but at the same time, I couldn't remember. Anyway. So when you go to South America and you look at the trees that are there, you've got figs, you've got different. There is nothing on earth. There are very few things on earth as miraculous or confusing as a vanilla bean. Take a deep dive into the development of the vanilla bean and then talk to me about how natural the rainforest really is. It too is a long-term managed multi-generational food forest that has been left untended for the past 400 years.
But I'll show you what's going on and how everything's recovered from the snowmageddon, snowpocalypse, and our late freezes and whatnot. But you can clearly see here we have lots of fruit going on right now. We have elderberries blooming and fruit starting to set on the elderberry. The mulberry trees are just starting to cycle out. We have lots of mulberries to pick on here. We've also upgraded our audio, and so we got some wireless mics for your viewing pleasure. And no, our YouTube channel does not generate that kind of revenue to pay for cool AV stuff, but we do it anyway. I want, you know, when I started this,
Amen,
and I had
brother.
this idea, I wanted to intensively plant everything to develop different layers of trees and shrubs, so that way there would be understories and microclimates. And once the superstructure gets developed, I want to really try to push our growing zone to see if we can get into the tropical zone 9 and 10 stuff. So that's why everything's so intensively planted. And it is a food jungle. And we have several varieties of mulberries. We have planted back here. We probably have.
Now, Harry, that's not impossible. If I'm not mistaken, in that general area, there are 3 clusters of American chestnuts, but most of your West Coast chestnuts are Chinese chestnuts brought over by the immigrants. Most of the American chestnuts existed above 300 feet or so, 900 feet. I don't know. It wasn't much. It wasn't very high. You don't find them on beaches. You don't find them in the Great Plains. You don't find them typically in river valleys per se. They kind of like rocky soil. Nowadays, the only way to recognize them is through their leaves, because they don't make fruit anywhere except one testing place. I think either there is one or there was one in North Georgia. And then there's a small patch in Ohio. There's another small patch in Northern California that was transplanted, if I'm not mistaken, from the one in Ohio. So that's not a genetic diversity. That's just a cloning, if I remember properly. I'm pretty sure the next video covers part of that. She seemed to be doing a really good job of the whole thing. But this guy's explaining how you go about creating a food forest circumstance. Now, this is a European approach to it. Like I say, rediscovering old methods of farming. Rather than planting things that you're going to eat this year, you can plant something that you're going to eat in 10 years, something you're going to eat in 5 years, and something you're going to eat 2 years, and something you're going to eat in 1 year, and do all that the same year. And the next year, do a very similar process to a different area. And you improve the soil while improving the understory, while improving the overstory and the superstructure. The whole thing becomes this self-feeding energy boost. And Frugal Gardener, the Frugal Homesteader is currently working on this very thing in like the high desert of Utah. And it's actually going pretty well for him. I'm quite impressed with him.
We have 60 or 80 varieties of figs. We have several varieties of persimmons. This is a Fuyu persimmon, and this is the first year that this is fruiting. Over here on the other side, we have a Tamapan persimmon. They're both Asian persimmons, large, seedless Asian persimmons. Pears do really well here, and we have several. We have 8 different varieties of pear. We're going to have a very large, we'll get hundreds of gallons of pears this year, Lord willing, of course. We do the planting, we do the sowing, God does the growing, and it's, you know, whatever he wills for us to actually land is what we get. The reason we intensively plant and we drop multiple varieties, species, and even variations of varieties is to help reduce pest pressure and eliminate pest pressure. The other thing we do that you'll notice, you'll see some Muscovy ducks and some chickens running around here, and they're helping keep the bugs down.
Yeah, Heather. About the persimmons, if you go around to persimmon trees that you find growing wild, you'll find that they're very, very bitter. In fact, there are several songs written about green persimmon wine. And while, oh, hey, Hike Camp, welcome to the show, bud. Good to see you. While these things are healthy and good to eat, they're also extremely difficult to actually do it, right? Like to actually eat them, that's another ball game. We're not talking like a pawpaw that tastes like a banana. We're talking about something that makes your teeth stick to your eyeballs. These things are, but occasionally, yeah, I was just fixing to say, occasionally you come across a persimmon that's sweet. And you'll notice usually these sweet persimmons are on trees that are larger than the bitter persimmons. And if you test each one and then clear out around the sweet persimmons and get rid of all the riffraff, that persimmon becomes the first stage to a food forest, because it will drop persimmons and feed thousands and thousands of animals over its lifetime. And these animals will spread its seeds, and 1 in 100 of those will be a sweet persimmon, or 1 in 1,000, or 1 in 1,000,000. I mean, it really doesn't matter at that point, as long as it actually works. I've never been mushroom hunting for food. And it didn't involve woods. I had to dodge cows. That's a story for another time. We'll get into that on a backstage at one night, because that's funny. That is funny. Oh Lord.
They are helping fertilize and doing all that stuff. We ran about 60 ducks and maybe 40 or 50 chickens back here all winter. And this was, I mean, they had it completely decimated. There was no greenery back here. There was so much bird pressure. Now we pull a lot of them off so that, because they will obviously.
You telling me, man? You ever met Super Smurf? I bet you haven't. Super Smurf gave me the secret of life, the universe, everything.
Eat the fruit if we let them. And so we don't do that. We have more elderberry back here. Obviously, you can see from the food forest we planted this side first, probably about 5 years ago. We continue to expand in that direction. So that's why everything over there is a little bit less mature.
You know,
but it's really strange.
He does this whole thing, this whole tour through this whole area, and you kind of get the idea. We're fixing to go to the next video, but you get the idea of what he's doing, right? He plants a 1/4 acre really intensely. He took the time to put a lot of chickens, a lot of goats, some sheep, whatever on it to clear the area first. And then he plants each tree individually and cares for them individually in small patches. 2 or 3, 5 figs, a couple of big nut trees, a few persimmons. You know, it's genius if you think about it. In 60 years, when he dies and his children inherit this land, they will have a choice between just retiring to go eat the bounty of his labor, or becoming like a roadside vendor of things that you could never get in Texas before because they just didn't grow them. Like these celestial figs out at my pop's. I've never seen another one. They're apparently not common in Georgia, and I got one, and these things are like honey. They're unbelievably good.
When you plant these trees that are like a couple feet tall, and then to walk back through here 4 years later, and you know, I just wanted it to be like a just this really cool place to be, where you can walk amongst the trees. And if it's got fruit on it, I don't prune it back. Once we harvest the fruit, I'm going to prune like walkways in here, but for right now I'm not really pruning anything. You can see more pear trees. We got some apple. This is, we have 4 or 5 different variety of apples. And this is an apple tree. And this is our 2nd year with fruit on this tree. Hopefully.
Yeah, there's 2 over here.
Yep, the birds won't eat it this year. Last year we left the birds back here and they got to our apple tree.
Well, yeah, no, this isn't a new idea by any stretch of the imagination. if you go into any heavily populated area in Europe all the way through to China, you'll find little areas of places where tribes and villages and whatnot, like take for instance, do you know what pollarding is? All right, so the English were renowned for their bows, but you can't make a yew bow from your average yew tree because the yew limbs do not grow straight and strong like the yew trunks. So what they would do is allow a yew tree to grow for 5 or 6 years, and then they would cut them off about waist high and let it sprout 10 million single trunks. These are not limbs, they're actual trunks, and you can make a yew bow from them. And if you've got 10 shoots coming off, you can make 10 bows from it. And it's a very efficient use of wood that isn't obvious unless you've been in the business for a while. On the other hand, almost all of the American forests, at least on the East Coast, were very heavily tended by the native population. They were regularly burned off to keep the understory burnt down, and done so with low temperature fires. They didn't wait long enough for it to build up a huge understory growth before they would burn it. All right, so y'all get the idea of what a food forest is. That covers that bit. Now,
welcome back to the
okay, I included this obviously for this man's eyes. I mean, tell me that's not an awesome set of Manson lamps. I mean, I just don't see this man being completely sane. What's really cool about this video to me, a little while later, you find him in like some subtropical hell over there, and he's obviously like at the end of his ropes with these bugs. And you see him doing this thing, like you can see them crawling on him. You can see him feeling them crawl on him, and it's cringy as all get out. I love it. Yeah, right. I swear, I don't know if it's because he's wearing a blue shirt or what, but man, those lamps are unbelievable. They're amazing.
Living classroom today.
Mr.
We've got
Studio
an exciting
Girl.
adventure.
Oh, boy.
We're flying into South America, Peru, to see how indigenous Shipibo communities are using permaculture food forests to regenerate the Amazon rainforest. Let's go. Here in the Amazon, the Chaikuni people are regenerating destroyed areas of the rainforest and turning them back into food forests. Now, food forests are forests that grow fruit, vegetables, herbs, and traditional medicines, and also help with climate change. Let's go find out which seeds and trees they are planting. Now, this is a reforestation.
All right, watch this man's body language while he's staring in here trying to have this conversation. First of all, look at his hair. He has been clawing at his head so much that it's standing straight up on end. That shirt is thoroughly soaked completely through with sweat, and you'll see him twitching here in just a second.
Site using permaculture. Now, what they've done is they've created a ground cover, which is a pinto peanut, a nitrogen fixing ground cover that's going to start fixing the soil. And as soon as I get my hand under that soil, it's moist, there's fungus in there, it's decomposing. It's basically like a little compost pile. I've got all sorts of little creatures in there. And that's holding the moisture in for all these other trees to start growing up, like our nitrogen fixing canopy trees, like our popcorn cassias, ice cream beans. They're going to provide the shade to hold the moisture in. And then you've got guavas, papayas, bananas, rambutans, the whole kit and caboodle.
Right. So in South America, just like with the persimmons in North America, you have all of these fruits that grow. But not just any tree is a good fruit tree. It's like vanilla beans, I'm thinking. I think it's part of the vanilla family. The vanilla family is a miracle unto itself. If you're not familiar with the background of the vanilla bean, y'all should really go look into that one, because it's one of those Mother Nature's kitchens that you can't invent. You have to find it and allow it to live. It's a perfect example of what the type of thing that permaculture can create, that you can't create in a laboratory, and you can't selectively breed it, right? Right, exactly. It's a very difficult thing to actually create, and instead you find it. The bean itself uses the same chemical compounds that are in the scents of various types of orchids, because it is an orchid, and it's also a tropical vine, and it's also, it's a really weird critter, and for it to exist is sort of a weird kind. I think it's one of the only of its type.
That can start growing up under that canopy.
Remember, a food forest isn't just about growing food, but also your own traditional medicines.
Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Voy a explicar de qué es sangre de grado.
Sangre de grado. It's a native South American tree that translates to dragon's blood, because when you cut the tree, it bleeds red blood, and that blood is said to have magical powers that speed up the healing process of cuts and help people with cancer. This is the achayote plant. Its seeds are used for cooking, dyeing fabric, and also war paint to ward off evil spirits. But it was also known as the lipstick tree because it was a natural makeup that would attract a partner.
How pretty.
Hermoso.
Beautiful. So look what we just found in our Amazonian food.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt. I have no doubt that the potency of ayahuasca was directly affected through selective breeding through permaculture type selection. Not the case where you go and pick the best seeds and plant it for the next generation. Instead, the random chance of biogenetics gets its chance at selectively breeding them, and you only keep the ones that are useful. That's glorious.
It's called the miracle fruit because apparently after you eat this fruit, it allows you to eat stuff that's really sour or really bitter. And I hate eating sour stuff like a lemon. But apparently if I eat this, it's going to make this taste really, really sweet.
It's true.
Should I check it out, or do you think I'm being tricked? It tastes nice. A little bit sweet, but not too much flavor. The real test is the lemon. You ready?
And this is wild.
Wow. I can't even taste the bitterness. Oh, wow. I can literally eat this without tasting the sour. The miracle fruit. I'm going to be keeping this seed for later.
I sense a challenge coming up.
So are you ready for your next challenge? Your challenge is to go to an organic fruit store and buy your favorite piece of fruit, or a piece of fruit that you don't recognize, like this custard apple. And what I want you to do for the rest of the episode is eat your piece of fruit and collect its seeds.
Okay,
are you ready?
But, people also utilize that to do their own spirit journeys, and they often talk about meeting the jaguars. So what if, I mean, this is just a shot in the dark here, one of those really wild what if on Sasquatch counts, but what if they were meeting each other on their spirit journeys? That'd just be creepy. And also another thing, why is it that everyone who does an ayahuasca trip has basically the same story to tell? That's not the case with mushrooms. With mushrooms, with LSD, with psilocybin, with things like this, mescaline, there's a broad breadth of reactions that people describe. But in ayahuasca, you can take a group of people who have no idea what they're taking and give them ayahuasca, and they will describe exactly the same experience that a group of people who intentionally took ayahuasca does. And to me, that strikes me as very, very strange. Some of that interdimensional elves type strange.
Let's go.
Let's head back to the food forest.
Any idea what this plant is? It's actually the cacao plant. This is where chocolate comes from. You crack this open, you can eat the flesh off the seeds, and then the seeds are turned into cacao powder, which is then turned into chocolate. I've always wanted to be a cacao boy. Have you ever wanted your...
Like, for instance, chocolate, cocaine, ayahuasca. These are things that in nature are either bitter. Hey, Michael Haywood, good to see you, bro. Are either bitter specifically to keep certain insects from eating them or certain animals from eating them, or poisonous to kill things that are growing underneath them to save the nutrients for the main plant. But they weren't kept around because of this. They were kept around because they're either addictive or useful, medicinal. I read somewhere that coca leaves have an antiseptic effect and a numbing effect on wounds. And so if you paste up, what is it called? Where you mortar and pestle it up into a paste and pack a wound with it, it numbs the wound and won't let it get infected to some extent. I don't know. I can't remember where I read that.
Your own supply of coffee? Well, here it is. It's a fantastic coffee plant that goes really well in the understory of a food forest. Never again will you have to buy coffee from the shops.
Did you know that a food forest doesn't just feed us? It feeds all the beneficial insects in our garden, like ladybugs, cicadas, and cute little caterpillars. But do you know which insect is the most important insect for our garden? Bees! This is the amazing Melipona bee. It's a native stingless bee that pollinates all the flowers.
I got a challenge for everybody. Let's end this here poll. We're right about that. We're going to end the poll. We're going to see what y'all think about it. 55% say 70%, 50% say 25, and 18%. No, 25 say 50, and 18 says 90. All right, so the number of food trees in the forest, eastern forest, cloud forest of the United States have been reduced, decimated to the tune of 90%. That, like, I wasn't just speaking of the specific, well, I guess maybe I did say species. No, I didn't say species. No, I wasn't speaking of the individual species. I was speaking of the bulk of food that are delivered by the tree and understory. So when you're talking about that, it's not just the first round of death and destruction that takes place, but there's an earlier effect of not removing the unfavorable trees in the first place, right? And so you have more of the less desirable types of species that grow older than they would have had it been properly tended. And I'm sure the various native tribes that managed the areas all had these spiritual, cultural, and religious or just base tribal rites that were part of this whole process, where, you know, certain areas were burned at certain times because it produced the best results for the past 3,000 years, you know, that kind of stuff.
Flowers of the food forest, so the trees can blossom with fruit. And inside this box is a beautiful hive full of very rare honey. And indigenous tribes use this honey for medicines to cure infection.
Next week, we're going to cover stingless bees, the North American gold mine.
In your eye, your lungs, and your stomach. And the good thing about this medicine is it's delicious. That's why it's so important to look after our bees. Without bees, we get no pollination. No pollination means no more fruit. No more fruit means no more trees, because we won't have any seeds. Speaking of which, how many seeds have you collected so far?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Yeah,
7,
I've
8,
seen
9.
those blue unicorns.
The beautiful thing about this permaculture project is we're not only creating a food forest scattered with beautiful traditional Shipibo medicine plants, but we're also restoring the lungs of the planet, absorbing all that carbon and releasing all that beautiful oxygen back into the atmosphere.
On Earth, everything is made from carbon. It's in the soil, the trees, the sky, the ocean, and even us. But when our Earth was really healthy, most of the carbon was stored safely under the ground with the help of trees and animals. But we chopped lots of those trees down and built mines and...
Right, I got you, bud. So I think it might be Bolivia. And also in Florida, there was a place in Florida that tried this very same method a few years later. Hey, Sunshine, welcome to the show. The locals decided that there was a problem with, and this is two separate orange juice facilities, right? That there was a problem with the way the orange juice companies were storing their skins and pulp that they didn't use in their processes for making orange juice, and there weren't enough farms and whatnot around to off-shelf it to fodder, because you can't feed them just citrus. That's not going to work. All right, Heather, you have a lovely evening. I appreciate your effort. So what they did was they took these massive piles of orange peels and pulp out to areas of unoccupied, unfarmable terrain in the edges and fringes of various forests. In Florida, they utilized a largely destitute and desiccated group of like Everglade Island type locations, and they just laid them down and used it to kill where some invasive grasses had come in and taken over the area. And they used orange skins to completely wipe out the invasive grasses and just left them there. And in both cases, over the course of the next few years, a lot of natural native trees and grasses sprouted from the decomposed remains of the 4.5 foot deep pile of oranges that were left. All right, so let's get into the American chestnut bit. This lady does an absolutely magnificent job of explaining this whole issue. I've been over here having a sneezing fit for the past 45 minutes. I hope I haven't sneezed into anyone. Or do I? Perhaps I should sneeze into you, and you would enjoy it.
This enormous old tree is a magnificent American chestnut. It was one of almost 4 billion American chestnut trees that grew up and down the eastern seaboard roughly a century ago. Yet today, a mature living American chestnut is a sight that most Americans have never seen, and chances are will never see in their lifetime. That is because the American chestnut, which ruled the hardwood forests of the eastern U.S. for longer than recorded history, is for all intents and purposes gone, and has been gone for more than...
Can I have a nerd moment? I'm going to take a nerd moment. Well, actually, hold on, let me do it right. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. No. Well, actually, the oil that people are pulling up from the ground weren't dinosaurs at all. It was actually diatomaceous, tiny little microscopic plankton and stuff that fell to various low spots on ocean floors and then got trapped between rocks and stuff. And it was processed through arcane processes into oil. So, not dinosaurs, but they were there like before the dinosaurs. A lot of this stuff's Permian and stuff. It's not nearly as recent as a lot of people think. Most of the major deposits were laid down in the very earliest sections of Earth's history, and not anything recent. And when I say recent, I mean not 65 million years ago, but like 300 million years ago. You know, we're not talking about anything recent, but not dinosaurs. Although I do tell people when I get my van, I'm going to get one of those big dinosaur burners and burn up all the dinosaur bones I can find. You've actually stumbled across something I've never actually investigated. I don't know anything about the distribution of redwoods on the West Coast or in Russia for that matter. I have no clue. And I'm going to definitely have to check that out because now I'm curious. Oh no, Kat is never late. She arrives precisely when she means to.
Half a century. Of those almost 4 billion chestnut trees that grew in this country in 1900, only a handful are left in their natural range, and only a handful of people, mostly in their 80s and 90s, have ever seen a mature chestnut tree growing in the woods. Dean Cornett is one of those. He's in his 70s, so he caught just the end of the chestnut's reign.
Chestnuts on ridges like this survive much longer than those at lower elevations. One of my first memories is walking along this path to what we called the new ground, gathering chestnuts with my father.
Oh, I can't wait to see that one.
As I remember, about a water bucket full. Came back the next year, again looking for chestnuts, but they were gone.
Now, what are left on his family land are stump rings like the one outlined with pink, and an occasional remaining chestnut stump like the one shown here. Even those are very rare. Before the blight struck, the chestnut made up 1 in 4 trees in its natural range. That historic range extended from the
every single 4th tree, oak tree, pine tree, nut tree, you name it, every 4th one was an American chestnut. Was a food producing tree. And now we don't have a single, well, we might have 4 in the world that produce chestnuts, perhaps.
Piedmont to the Ohio River Valley, and from southern Maine to a little piece of northern Mississippi. All told, chestnuts towered over more than 200 million acres of American forests. Most of that historic territory coincides closely with the Appalachian Mountains, and the slopes of the Appalachians were where the bulk of American chestnut trees were found. They shaded and fed Hernando de Soto and his men when they passed through the Appalachians in 1540. They were so widespread that a chronicler known only as a gentleman of Elvas, when describing that journey, wrote, "Where there be mountains, there be chestnuts." The blight that wiped out the American chestnut has been called the greatest ecological disaster to strike the world's forests in all of history. When it hit fast and hard. American chestnuts growing on the land that holds the botanical gardens and the Bronx Zoo were found to be dying, killed by a blight brought in on imported Asian chestnut trees. But the blight didn't stay in New York. Spread by animals, birds, and wind, it moved outward at an average of 25 miles a year, and sometimes at twice that rate, and it brought nearly total destruction with it. By 1909.
If you're interested in coming up and having that conversation, bud, that's not in just California. That is every single major stand of pine trees in our country. Those pine-boring bark beetles are going to eradicate most of the native species. Although, in the past few years, some of the newer generations of like white pine and loblolly and yellow pine 3, these things have been developing resistance to those beetles. So there is hope. It's not a certain thing. It's not like the American chestnut where like on a Tuesday they all died. These are going to take time, and the time that it takes is going to give the plants a little bit of a fighting chance against them, although it's a very rapid process. If you've ever seen a forest wiped out by those things in a couple of years, it's staggering. Down here, you can get hey, Izzy, welcome to the show, girl. Down here, you can get plots of land with contaminated trees for almost half price of plots of land where they've already been clear cut. But here's something to keep in mind if you were to buy one of those plots. When you buy it, the new trees that are growing on the plot, unless they were specifically selected to defend against the pine boring beetle, will be infested with pine boring beetles. That is just the nature of the game, bro.
The blight was established in Pennsylvania, where extreme efforts were made to stop it.
There are places in Pennsylvania where they cut all the chestnut trees for miles to no avail.
By 1945, the blight had moved across the entire range of the American chestnut and left ghost chestnuts in its wake, tall silver-white skeletons that towered above the living forest, like these trees on Pine Mountain in eastern Kentucky. A tree that had survived all adversaries.
I got a little bit of housekeeping for the channel, something somebody pointed out. I've largely built this channel as a entertainment channel because of the nature of the interviews that I do. But if I'm going to do very many more of these types of shows where I just go deep dive a particular topic or do a mishmash of 3 topics that have relatable material to them, I might have to switch over to being something educational. Or is that something I can switch with each stream? Because I'm pretty sure this is relatively educational. Am I wrong? You know, that changes the fair use properties of the YouTube algorithm.
Years had disappeared within 40. But the calamity had less to do with the speed of the disappearance than with 2 other factors. The first was the completeness of the destruction.
There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. I guess she'll die. There was an old woman who swallowed a bat. Wait, no. She swallowed a spider, and it wiggled and tickled inside her. Swallowed a spider to catch the fly, but I don't know why she swallowed a fly. There was an old woman who swallowed a bat. How about that? She swallowed a bat, swallowed a bat to catch the spider, swallowed the spider to catch the fly, but I don't know why she swallowed a fly. There was an old lady, swallowed a cat. Ugh, a cat. Swallowed the cat to catch the bat, swallowed the bat to catch the spider, swallowed the spider to catch the fly, but I don't know why she swallowed a fly. I guess she'll die. How far do we want to go with this one?
Diseases had hit before, but never a disease that essentially left no survivors. 4 billion trees just disappeared.
So here's my question on that, right?
Okay,
so as a camping person, when you find the dead remains of these standing trees, is there any freaking use to these things whatsoever? Can they be used for like fires and stuff like? You really don't want to smoke or cook on them like that, but you could use it for like a basic campfire, right? I mean, it'd be a really hot one because it's pine. But it's not completely unusable, is it? I know once they've stood for a few years, they fall down with a horrendous crash.
Commonly say that more than 99.99% of our American chestnuts were killed by the blight. As
Harry.
As that sounds.
Oh, Harry. There's another channel I want you to check out. It's called Scully's House of Tingles. Thrillers. Scully's House of Thrillers. Not too long ago, we did a Peter Pan live action sort of play where we all did different voices. I really wanted to do Captain Hook in a James Earl Jones style. I find your lack of happy thoughts disturbing. Right?
It is a monumental understatement. If even that 1/10,000th of American chestnuts had survived, we would still have nearly 400,000 chestnuts in our woods. Yet it's estimated that only a few hundred bearing chestnuts survive today in all of that 200 million acres.
And keep in mind, this is an 11-year-old video. 11 years ago, they had a tiny inkling of a hope of saving a few of these chestnuts. At this point, as I understand it, they're working on a way to inoculate existing chestnut trees so that the new shoots that grow aren't affected by the blight. And I hear tell they're having a little bit of success with this, but I don't know how much. It's kind of hard to get from papers, you know.
Perhaps 1 or 2 chestnuts in every million acres.
But I know there's a lot of them. I put that way, a lot of chestnut up in this mountain up here. There was a world of chestnuts up there.
It's been said that chestnut was a part of the Appalachian culture from the cradle to the grave. And I can tell you, I've seen cradles that were made out of chestnut, and I've seen coffins that were made out of chestnut.
The chestnut was so vital to the Appalachian economy because it was unlike any other tree that grew in the eastern forest. References to the spreading chestnut tree apply to chestnuts grown in the open. In the forest, a chestnut grew straight up seeking light. The chestnut in this photo rises 70 feet before it even branches. At maturity, a forest chestnut on average was 100 to 105 feet tall as a 10-story building, and may at times have reached 130 feet.
They grow big. They're about the biggest tree that grows in the woods. Them chestnut trees, kids.
Tell you another thing I stumbled across in some old book. When you go through the South and you see these fields that have these spots in the middle of the field that have hundreds of oak trees in them or whatever, or they'll have a little patch of forest right in the middle of a food plot. And there's no real reason for that batch of trees to be there. The reason those trees are typically there is once there was a chestnut there. And there may still be a chestnut there. And in the future, should an inoculation become a useful thing. Yeah, the GMO chestnut. Yeah, no, my pops just recently bought some, he got some of the modified Chinese chestnuts. And then not this year, next year, he's going to try to plant the other side of the valley over there and American chestnuts, which that was a hard conversation because he's like, why would I bother planting them? They're just going to die. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. If you can get one to survive, just one, it gives the ability to work from that base, right? So, I mean, yeah, there's a good chance it's just going to be a shot of a couple of grand to the wind, but hell, you got to give it a shot, right? That's the way I feel about it anyway. I mean, can you imagine it? One tree, like, look out your window and you see 50 trees. I don't know about you. I'm in Georgia. 50 is a conservative number. The magnolia, the plum trees, all of that stuff. That's another good one. Native plums. That's not what you would see 200, 300 years ago. You would see chestnut, 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 a magnolia. Chestnut, 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 because people would cut down things that were useless and leave the things that were useful, and chestnuts are useful. Whereas Chinese chestnuts look like a hail seed from beyond the freaking outsider's universe. I mean, these things look like a mace head of danger and death, right? All right, bud, you go eat, hike camp. That's cool. I appreciate it. I appreciate y'all coming by. American chestnut has a much more feathery casing. And so you can walk around without catching an infection in your foot from an American chestnut that you can't do with a Chinese chestnut. Those things are like, there's little spines, every single one of them get infected. It's insane. If you ever step on one, it'll go.
Than an outstretched person. More impressive still is the report that in 1934, a large chestnut stump was found at Greenbrier, North Carolina.
Oh no, ma'am. Sweet gum balls are a whole nother ball game, man. Sweet gum balls are like tiny little things. Whereas the chestnut, I'm not joking. If you're standing under a significantly sized Chinese chestnut tree and one of those things fall on you, it might kill you. Yes, go shove dead flesh into your face hole. I approve.
Measured 13 feet the long way. While the past 60 years have reduced the dead chestnut trees to remnants, one huge old chestnut stood until about 10 years ago on the land of John and Gary Back in Letcher County, Kentucky. It has fallen now, but the stump is still partially intact.
Welcome to the show, bud.
The
Good to
fallen
see
trunk
you.
still stretches well down the hillside. When it was still standing, John Back and two of his friends tried to reach around it. The trunk was so large that the three of them together, although they could span about 18 feet, could not touch fingers around the tree. Besides their enormous size, chestnut trees grew faster than their neighbors, maybe half again as fast as oaks, and usually 20% faster than even quick-growing poplars. It was said that in the time a seedling of another tree made a baseball bat, a chestnut made a railroad tie. Chestnuts also sprouted prolifically. If you cut a chestnut, the roots would immediately send up sprouts, and more than one of those would grow to a good size in a very short time. In this photo, you can see not only the parent stump, but under Scott Friedhoff's hands, a foot-wide sprout remnant. In this photo, taken before the blight hit, chestnut sprouts form an almost perfect circle around the cut stump. In the early 1900s, before the blight, the newly formed U.S. Forest Service recommended deliberately cutting large chestnuts to encourage multiple trees. It was called coppicing, and the chestnut was one of the best coppicing trees in the forest.
Not pollarding, coppicing.
Besides that,
wait, no, I think pollarding and coppicing are slightly different. I think coppicing is where you cut it off at the ground, and pollarding is where you cut it off at like 8 foot, 6 foot, something like that. One makes bow staves, the other makes ginormous wood, you know, like Sasquatch.
a chestnut could live 400 to 600 years. All in all, it was nearly a perfect tree. Almost every part of the chestnut yielded something, and the most valuable product was probably the wood, but the most widely known product was the nuts. One chestnut tree would produce as much as 3 bushels of chestnuts, sometimes much more. So 4 billion trees could annually yield as much as 12 billion bushels of mast.
We have something down here called a wax myrtle. And all of my life, I have used it as an insect repellent. And I don't know. It's just something that when you know it's there and you're having problems with mosquitoes, you grab some of it, you crush it up, kind of sprinkle it about yourself. It's not quite as effective as DEET, but it'll stop mosquitoes and gnats. It also runs off gnats, which is a big deal. And I'll be in a crowd of people. There'll be like 6 people there, and everybody's batting away at the gnats and stuff. And they look over at me and like, why aren't you swinging it around? You see that tree over there? Yeah. You can use it too, dude. It's right there.
Which is the usual Appalachian term for chestnut, oak, beech, and other nuts found in the woods. Chestnuts were also one of the most.
Oh, by the way. All right. Do y'all see this poor bastard underneath me over here in this picture? I have no idea who he is, what he was arrested for, none of that stuff. Apparently he's a federal inmate, but apparently he recently got completely fucked up by somebody. Look at him. Why he's got a mug shot when he's already a federal inmate, I have no idea. But why they took a mug shot of him all fucked up like that baffles me. I'm very curious. Very curious. I had to pause it on it so I wouldn't lose it. And I'm going to go check to see what's up with that dude, because homie had a real bad day.
The blooms were cream colored and 6 to 8 inches long, and the tree would often be almost covered. Donald Peaty described a forest of blooming chestnuts stirred by the wind as looking like a sea of white combers plowing across its surface. Where there were whole hillsides of chestnuts, it was an unforgettable display. The blooms opened in late June and lasted some while, and you'd often hear it said that the mountains looked like they were white with snow on the 4th of July. Noel Moore could remember the honey from chestnut blossoms.
The blossoms gave up one of the best honey crop we ever had. Whenever the chestnut bloomed in the morning early, the trees looked like Just the whole tops were alive with honeybees working on getting the nectar.
30 or 40 years ago, Jake Waldrop of North Carolina described what the chestnuts were like.
The nuts grow inside a bird, and it's a big thing, as big as your fist. Along about the fall of the year, when it starts frosting, they'll open. Then the chestnut falls out, and later the burr itself will drop off. I've seen them a time or two in the fall. It'd come a dry spell of weather and the burrs would open, but there wouldn't be enough moisture and the nut wouldn't get loose of the burr. I've seen hundreds of bushels hanging up. Then it'd start to cloud up, rain some, and it was a sight on earth. Just in an hour or two, the whole earth would be covered with chestnuts.
Noel Moore remembered the same bounty.
You could go into the woods in the fall and where a log falling across the side of the hill and the chestnuts would roll down again it. You could reach down and pick them up by a double handful.
Richard C. Davis quotes one Appalachian woman as saying,
I've heard stories from some of the old folks when I was a kid talking about how they would go camping, or not camping, but hunting for 3 or 4 days, and they wouldn't take very much food with them at all. Because, like he said, you could just wander over to some low spot where they accumulated, where the rain would wash them, and pick up enough chestnuts to roast and have a decent meal that night. Maybe catch a fish or two, kill a rabbit, something like that. You know, it was very easy to live. It wasn't a struggle like it is today, because there was literally food growing on all the trees, and it wasn't bad tasting food. It just needed the proper treatments, like a fire.
a grove of chestnuts is a better provider than a man, easier to have around too. American chestnuts were smaller than Chinese or European chestnuts.
That's better than real nuts.
The size of a nickel, but they were prized much more than their larger cousins. People who have tasted the American chestnut say neither European chestnuts nor Chinese chestnuts can compare to it, and to its close relative, the Allegheny chinkapin.
I've gathered a many one of them. Had a sticky burr, and then you had to get that burr off of them. You boiled them and boiled them and boiled them, and then you cracked them and you could eat them. They're soft.
In the Appalachians, people gathered chestnuts not only to eat but to sell. They often had to compete with their own livestock to do that. One Blue Ridge resident remembered going out by lantern light to gather chestnuts to beat the hogs to them. Others remembered competing with turkeys to get to the chestnuts first. Once they were gathered, people put them in sacks and took them on horseback or by wagon to a buyer. Sometimes the buyer would be a local store owner.
At one time they'd haul those things with a wagon load, just had a lot of chestnuts.
I seem to remember from somewhere that Cecil told somebody that his father one year shipped, I think it was 17 or 18 wagon loads of chestnuts out of his store. Now, that's just memory, but I think he had his wagons all lined up and shipped them all at one time and took them over to Stewart and shipped them on a train.
Enterprising local people would sometimes take them to a distant market themselves.
I grew up listening to chestnut stories from my dad. During the Depression, he and a first cousin would load an old 8-model Ford full of chestnuts and moonshine whiskey, I have to tell you that, and haul it to Washington, D.C., and peddle the chestnuts on the street and sell a little moonshine whiskey to wash it down with.
Once a wholesaler had bought the chestnuts, they were shipped out of the Appalachians multiple ways. In Kentucky, they were often put on steamboats plying the Big Sandy and taken downriver to the Ohio and sometimes the Mississippi, where they supplied the big river cities along the way. The most common transportation out of the region was probably railroad, and huge quantities of chestnuts left the mountains that way.
Consider this. This is the same time period in which you hear stories of children making a penny for every passenger pigeon they brought into the barrel. You also hear in this same time period about people getting a few cents for every cow skull or bison skull they brought in off the plains. These types of things were a byproduct of an apocalyptic event. something that eradicated more animals than the entire American history. This one event rendered our forest virtually infertile for food. And it's devastating. It's been devastating the East Coast ever since. Without these trees, the animals do what the animals are doing now, which is basically become diseased, parasite-ridden, starving carcasses of their former selves. Hey, Tales Told in the Dark, welcome back.
Railroad station in West Virginia shipped 155,000 pounds of chestnuts in the autumn of 1911. In October 1915, the Patrick County, Virginia newspaper reported that the D&W Railway had sailed.
Years ago, Woodrow Whittaker tells me that it was considered by him a rite of passage into young adulthood to be allowed to go with his older brothers and his dad to the Black Mountain in the fall of the year to gather chestnut. They'd leave home early one morning and they'd go up Cowan and through the Scuttle Hole Gap and down the Pine Mountain on the.
I know I've used the term decimated on several occasions, but it's worse than that, man. It's decimated is 1 in 10 by definition. And this is all but 1 in a million. Actually, no, I'm sorry. All but 1 in a million acres. So several million trees. There might be one left out there that you might not even recognize because you've never seen an adult American chestnut.
The other side, and when they'd hit the Cumberland River bottoms, they'd turn left upstream, take them up to the mouth of Franks Creek, where they had to turn right toward the Virginia line. And somewhere in those bottoms right there, they made camp. Early the next morning, they'd get up, continue on their way up to the great chestnut forest on the Black Mountain, fill their wagon and load their horses with chestnuts, and make their way back down the mountain and down Franks Creek to their campground. And they'd stay there that night. And the next morning, they'd get up early again and make their way back down the Cumberland, up Pine Mountain, through the Scuttle Hole, back down this side to Cowan, and eventually back to Rock House here with a winter's supply of chestnuts.
We knew when this radio rock, because the birds was beginning to open up and the chestnuts fall out, you know, and we knew they was ready. Sometimes the whole thing fell off. Schools all turn out and let the children go to the woods.
Chestnut masts supported all kinds of life. The millions of passenger pigeons that flew the skies of the eastern U.S. in the 1800s were sustained by chestnut mast. Wild turkeys were, bears were, so were other birds and smaller animals. Chestnut mast also fed livestock. People in the 1800s.
Neither am I indoctrinated. I'm just on the tail end of it.
They would forage freely across property.
Hey, Farlap, welcome to the show, bud. Good to see you.
An elderly Appalachian named Man Norton said his father almost always had 150 or 200 hogs running loose in the woods, as did most families. There was no concern about observing property boundaries because there were so many chestnuts, but it was the practice in most places to identify the hogs to owners by unique notch patterns in their ears, in the same way that brands identified cattle in the open ranges of the Old West.
And if you've ever heard the story of the Hatfield-McCoy feud, it is one of these notches that is the root, or according to some of the myth and legends of it, the root of the original killings that started the feud. There was somebody, either someone was faking earmarks or not, depending on which side you believe.
In the fall, the hogs would grow fat on chestnuts. In fact, hog meat was one of the best cash crops for mountaineers.
Up in the mountains, when you're in Floyd, just up the road, just stop about 2 or 3 miles. The people used to go a lot of hogs, turn loose in the mountain, and my father, he said, when he was a boy, they didn't even know exactly how many hogs they had. Turn them wild up there, you know, all over the mountain. But they were all the mountain, and they just lived in there. They lived on the chestnuts and acorns. They just lived on them. They didn't have to fatten them at all. Didn't have any have food to corn. He was a boy, so they decided to get some, go to Roanoke, had to have some money, you know. Because my father was a boy now. But I know my father said he'd go up in the mountain, and he had an old mountain rifle, and his uncle, father's uncle, he'd go up and they'd kill so many hogs. Gun dress them, pack them on a wagon, go to run up, be gone a week.
In addition to the annual bonanza of nuts, there was the value of the wood. Chestnut trees were huge, so one tree yielded a lot of timber. The wood was strong, light, very straight grain for most of its length, and split easily, so it was ideal for shingles and shakes and also for fence rails. When Abraham Lincoln was earning his nickname as the rail splitter, it's likely that some of the wood he was splitting was American chestnut. Chestnut was prized for furniture and musical instruments.
Hey, Scully, we was just talking about you.
Finish.
Oh, the wood from chestnuts makes the prettiest furniture. I've got a frame right there now as a chestnut frame. That was from old tree on Lawn Park.
Chestnut was also used for houses, for barns, and for many other needs of everyday life.
By looking at the grain of this wood, you can see why so many people used it for different things, like splitting rail. By the grain, you can tell that it would split easy by the way it looked at the grains of the wood.
It was also a favorite for kindling because it was so easily split into the small pieces needed to start a fire. Long after the blight had brought the chestnuts down, people still sought them for kindling.
I remember with my dad.
You'll enjoy that under Dr. I promise.
We'd take crosscut saw and we would saw the chestnut logs up into blocks that we could handle manually. Everybody would just gather around and kind of bring their own hatchets and sit around and tell old tales. 12 noon till, say, late in the evening, around 4 or 5 o'clock, that pile of kindling would get pretty high.
We always, in the fall, we'd go and pull us out 2 or 3.
It's kind of like Joe Cool.
Saw them up in.
If you post a StreamYard link 3 times in chat and say Joe Cool's name 4 times and turn around once, he'll be in backstage waiting to say something about whatever you just mouthed off about. What's up, Hiking Deep? Good to see you, bud. We'll get that up on the screen.
With an end of about 18-inch blocks, and then we would split them up for the winter, and we'd fill our wood house full of wood because we had a wood cook stove and 2 fireplaces. Took a lot of wood.
But while chestnut was great for kindling, it wasn't used much once the fire was going because it popped and cracked so much that embers would escape the fireplace and threaten to set the house on fire.
There used to be an old man, Johnny Fields, lived between the twin bridges. He always told that his mother wanted to be buried in the chestnut casket so that when she went through hell, she could go popping and cracking.
As said, chestnut wood was very rot resistant. Contact with the ground didn't break it down the way it did other wood.
Fact of the business is, if it gets down in there where no air gets to it, I don't know whether it ever rot or not. There's old sogs. That's an old tree that's fell and gotten buried up in the dirt. You can dig out and they'll be sound as can be. Logs that have been laying there for hundreds of years.
The tree was so rot resistant because it was high in tannic acid, so much tannic acid that the trees were sometimes called tan bark chestnuts. The tannic acid that made it rot resistant and therefore good for telephone poles and similar applications also made it invaluable for tanning animal hides. It became common when chestnuts were cut to strip the bark from the log and ship it to a tannery. Once the tree was down, the bark would be cut into 4-foot lengths and then peeled off the log with a spud like the one shown in the girl's hand. Then it would be piled against the log sap side down to dry. Once it was dry, the tan bark would be hauled out of the woods on a sled like the one shown here.
Did I miss Walter?
Loaded into wagons to go to market.
Hey, Walter, what's up, good? Good to see you.
Sometimes the tree was cut only for the bark and the log was left lying, but other times the tannin was extracted from the log as well, and then the chips used to make paper. Some of the strong opposition to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park came from paper manufacturers who fought against losing the great number of trees, including and perhaps especially chestnuts, that grew on lands being condemned to create the park. While industry suffered a blow when the chestnuts disappeared, they were able to switch to alternative wood for telephone poles, tannin, and paper. The impact was otherwise for the Southern Appalachian people. It would not be overstating the case to describe the impact to some of the population as devastating. The 4 best cash crops in many southern Appalachian counties were said to be chestnuts, hogs, apples, and moonshine. When the blight killed the chestnuts, it also killed the trade in hogs, because most people couldn't afford hog feed to replace chestnut mast. Southern Appalachians lost 2 of their 4 best sources of cash in a single blow. The economic blow was compounded in Southern Appalachia by the timing of the devastation. The blight struck many areas at roughly the same time the Great Depression struck. The economic blow to the Southern Appalachians was irrecoverable. Some old-timers say the chestnut blight ushered in the end of subsistence farming in the Appalachians. They link the destruction wrought by the chestnut blight to the beginning of the great Appalachian outmigration toward wage jobs. That economic blow may be partly why people with memories of that time still mourn the chestnut.
You ever heard the term stump water used to describe moonshine? That was a description of a type of really rough white lightning that was made using chestnuts way back in the day. I think if you dig up some of the old Foxfire issues, there's a chestnut moonshine mix in there that uses like wild rices and grains and chestnuts. It does say something about it being a very acquired taste. I'm assuming it's not real good.
Don't remember exactly when the blight came, but it was devastating. We all regretted it so bad because we all loved the chestnuts.
People who were too young to experience the loss personally understood it through the reactions of older people.
The only time I ever saw tears in my dad's eyes was when he would talk about the chestnut, the loss of the chestnut, what that meant to the mountain people.
Some of them,
I want
like
some.
Rex Mann, have committed themselves to doing something about the loss of the chestnut.
I want some.
All of their options depend on the availability of living trees. For that reason, it is a cause for celebration when
Buddy, I will eat me up some mud bugs. Don't threaten me with a good time. And can Granny make them too? Damn right. Let me get my van. I'll be along that way here directly. I might even bring you a little bit of that moonshine I've been telling you about. Yeah, no, I'm sure most of y'all don't know my last name, but yeah, we were moonshiners.
a chestnut old enough to bloom is found. Besides finding these large living trees, individual landowners have made efforts to nurse along the saplings that grow from the old roots until they are old enough to bloom. To do that, you need to catch the cankers that infect the tree before they have girdled it.
This American chestnut tree growing here on a ridgetop in Letcher County does have chestnut blight growing on it here at the base of the tree, and that's really typical because that's where the bark will split first, and so you typically see the fungus attack the tree at the base like that. One remedy for this canker on this tree would be to dig up just a little soil from around the tree here, mix it with water in a bucket, pack it on there. It's called mud packing. There's a fungus in the soil that will then kill the fungus on the tree, and you're supposed to leave the mud pack on for 1 year. So if we mud pack it now, we'd come back for next year and take the plastic and the duct tape off, and that canker should be healed up.
Preserving chestnut sprouts until they bloom, along with finding new mature chestnuts in bloom, are both important for biodiversity if the chestnut is ever to be successfully restored. Over the years, there have been a number of such restoration efforts. If these efforts prosper, there's hope that the American chestnut will once again grace the eastern U.S.
So I've got one more little clip that I kept in the background because it's such an interesting tidbit of how we are absolutely destroying our own environment. Did you know that there is a desert in Georgia? Now, it's not your usual desert based on rainfall. And a lot of advancements been made to kind of repair the damage that was done. But many years ago, there was a group of family farms that were in the same valley, and they repeatedly planted the same crops over and over and over again until they completely desiccated the nutrient value in the sand of the valley. Then the erosion started. And at first, it just looked like your average desert out in the middle of nowhere for no explicable reason. But once it started washing away, something amazing happened. And it's horrendous and terrifying.
The area just south of Columbus, Georgia, is home mostly to pine forests.
Hold on 1 second. Let me get this done right so that I'm not doing it wrong. All right. So this one's not in the description. I wasn't expecting to get this far, to be honest. I'll put it in the description as soon as we get done. Really don't like messing with it while I'm live. But yeah, no, it created a massive sand and clay canyon in Georgia that you're riding along through the rolling Georgia hills, and then suddenly poof, something that vaguely resembles a soft Grand Canyon opens up on one side. And then you're riding through little valleys and stuff that have all been washed out, and it's wild. It's absolutely wild. You look like you're on an alien landscape.
Low rolling hills and farmland. But if you head west for just 12 minutes to the town of Lumpkin, you'll enter a landscape that seems more like the Southwest than the South. A series of 12 huge canyons slice up the hillsides, stunning cliffs and pillars of red and white lining the canyon walls. This string of spectacular canyons would be impressive on its own, considering its location. It's a landscape that stands out in a mostly canyon-free part of the country. But even more intriguing is the fact that all these canyons, known collectively as Providence Canyon, were created entirely by accident. And it isn't alone. Across the United States and the world exist geographic features that stand out in stark contrast from their surrounding areas. In this video, I'll be taking you through a few geographic features in the US that seem out of place compared to their surroundings, as well as parts of states that are very different from the perception.
In my experience, I've done that at least twice. And I think I walked up on some people growing pot one time. But at least, in fact, the people, and this was weird to me, the people who were moonshining, you could smell them from miles away because they were running a fire in the middle of the woods where no fire should be. And I just sniffed my way over there, and we sat around and drank some leavings and had us a big old time. Both times I walked up on some people moonshining. When I walked up on people that I'm pretty sure were out there guerrilla farming weed, these guys were all assholes. They were all total freaking assholes. They were threatening, off-putting. They were completely terrible people. So I just disappeared. I didn't enjoy my meeting with them, and so I just stopped being there anymore.
People have about them. Hello and welcome to That Is Interesting. I'm your host, Carter. Today, more geographic anomalies of the United States. This video is part of a series on out-of-place geography. I have 3 more that are already up, so make sure to give them a watch. And if you have more ideas of places both in the US and around the world to include, please leave a comment and let me know, because I certainly will be making more. In the beginning of the 1800s, there were no canyons in this part of Georgia. The region was made up of low rolling hills covered in forests. In the 1800s, settlers began establishing cotton plantations there, farmed by the forced labor of enslaved people. They chopped down and uprooted trees and replaced parts of the forest with farmland. All this deforestation, though, was happening on top of the hills. On top of that, they were unaware that the layer of soil they were planting on was very, very thin. Underneath it sat sand and clay, impossible to farm and easily susceptible to erosion. Trees are very important for preventing erosion. Their roots hold soil in place, especially on the sides of hills and mountains. With tree cover gone, the soil washed out whenever it rained, down the hillsides and into the small valleys in between.
Good to have
There wasn't
you,
that much soil on the hills to begin with, and after just 20 years, it had completely washed away. The sand and clay underneath eroded with it, and small canyons began to form. With every rainstorm, they only continued to grow and eat away at the landscape, leaving behind a multicolored cross-section of the earth that lay beneath the hills. Today, the dozen canyons that make up Providence Canyon are in places 150 feet deep, and the erosion that formed them shows no sign of stopping. With such weak soil and sediment, the damage was done as soon as the hilltop plantations were created, and today, Providence Canyon grows by as much as 3 feet each year, and there's little that can be done to stop it. It's a beautiful and stunning landscape that stands out starkly from the area around it, as well as a warning of the damage, even unintentionally, that people can do to the land.
Much love, y'all.
The southwestern US and the north of Mexico are dominated by deserts. If you think of Arizona, chances are you're picturing red rocks, stunning desert scenery like the Grand Canyon, or dry, barren, cactus-covered landscapes. I've already talked about the forests of central Arizona in another out-of-place geography video.
All right, so I can explain the laid-backness of moonshiners as opposed to people growing marijuana. Moonshining, by definition, is not illegal until or unless you're planning to sell it, profit, and not pay your taxes, right? As long as you pay your taxes on moonshining, on making any type of alcohol, you can make it, and you can make a certain amount untaxed. And if you have a very, very large farm, you might have some leeway to make more, but you have to make it undrinkable. I can't remember what they call it, but you got to do a thing to it so that you can't just go get a jug out of it and drink it, you know. But that's not true with marijuana growers. If they're caught growing marijuana, that's illegal. They're going to jail, and they don't care who you are, right? You're a witness.
But in southern Arizona, as well as in parts of New Mexico and across the border in the Mexican states of Sonora and Chihuahua, sit a beautiful and fascinating geographic phenomenon: the Sky Islands. The dry, flat scenery
That's
of
a totally different show. We're going to cover those on a totally different show. That's not for tonight. All right, so we were going after the canyons, the new canyons in Georgia over here. They're not the only ones. There's a double handful of locations throughout Georgia where either bad mining practices, bad water management, bad forestry practices, or various other things created erosive conditions. In fact, locally, we had a number of limestone caves. Remember, I keep telling you that the swamp behind my pop's house is actually on top of a karst formation of limestone, and there's a bunch of sinkholes all through it. And there's probably more water running through those sinkholes than there are through those cave systems than there are through that entire swamp, which is disturbing. And the old saying goes, nothing comes out of the Medlock hole. So in the mid 40s and 50s, well, mid 50s, the Army Corps of Engineers come through this area and dynamited, detonated, and blew up every single cave they could find. If it was big enough for a person to climb in, they blew it up. They blew it flat. And so now when you're riding through this area, like you go a little further north and a little further south, and well, further south, you don't see any of this stuff because there aren't any caves. But you go a little bit further north and you come across places where that hadn't happened, and you're just in these rolling foothills. But then you drop off into this county, and suddenly the foothills don't roll quite so much as they used to. They're more like little short canyons, and the roads cut right across the top of them. That's because the Army Corps of Engineers come through, blew the caves flat, and that's what you're seeing are the exposed caves bottoms, or the overburden that was dropped into the cave. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's like that. So how'd you like it? That was pretty good? Terrible? Because they're all right. That is kind of a debatable point. There's one story that a group of students got lost in some of the caves and died, but I can find no actual evidence that that ever took place. The only person, I can only find the evidence of one person who died supposedly in one of these caves, and he fell in a sinkhole, and that was in like 1890. So why the Army Corps of Engineers came through and blew up the caves is because, as I understand it, the local city council and county asked them to. Why? Don't know. Probably, maybe, possibly had something to do with stopping the moonshiners from using the caves. I don't know. But like I said, I could never find any actual evidence that anyone ever got lost in any of these caves. So, and they weren't that extensive, although there is a story about a group of smugglers who used a series of these caves that went from the same group of Army engineers also built the bomb shelter in our courthouse, and they use it for records keeping now. But supposedly, when they built that bomb shelter, they encountered a smuggler's cave that went from here 7 miles to the nearest town over here. From this square, town center, to that town center. And you could go the whole way without ever poking your head above ground. Now, why it was there, what it was used for, probably prohibition type stuff, if I had to guess. I mean, that is the right time period. We are talking about this area. So I always kind of figured that they came through and blasted all the caves when they discovered the smuggling cave, because they wanted to just eliminate that whole process from being an issue. Also, there is at least one newspaper article I read that claimed it would improve the hunting. Although I don't remember the reasoning behind that. Doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm going to drop the link in chat. Anybody wants to come backstage, we can pick a movie to watch while I drink my rum, or y'all can just ignore the link and I'll go to bed. That's how that works. Now let me find the link, because we're consummate professionals. But ain't nobody coming up until after I come off the live, because I'm not playing those games. And it ain't personal on nobody. I ain't have no guests at all tonight. So there. One of these days, I'm actually going to figure out how to do a show without having a guest. And I'll be a real boy then. Ain't no strings on me. I feel like there's more to that. I'm almost certain there's more to that. I'm suddenly intrigued, dude. Now the story that I got from, all right, so we have this jail, this old, like pre-Civil War back, like really, really, really old jail. It's like freaking 200 years old or something. It predates just about every building in this town. And for, I don't know, 150 years, the city used that jail as a storage place for records. And when I was in high school, the city wanted to change from using the jail for records to using the bomb shelter under the courthouse for records. And so they installed a whole bunch of like those big ass filing cabinets, and they got a bunch of us bad kids to come do forced slave labor, you know, like, you know, they do. Oh, there it is. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's back in the day of yellow journalism. And anyway, so the story in this particular newspaper, I was one of the kids, one of the bad kids they came and got to do this whole transfer thing. And so what we had to do is go through all the boxes, all the filing cabinets, all the things, and provided the paper itself hadn't become wet and damaged, it was to be stacked in the same order it was in the drawers into the boxes. So from top down through the different drawers. Now, keep in mind, these drawers are made of wood, and they were probably installed back before Sherman was general. So yeah, no, these things, like the boxes, the filing cabinet type things, which they weren't, you wouldn't recognize them as filing cabinets. They were totally handmade and stuff, were literally falling apart. When you go to pull out the box of papers, the sides would fall off on it, and you'd have to kind of clutch them to yourself and then try to stack them back in the order that they were in the drawer, and then place them in the argon neutral thing that they were stored in when they got put in the next ones, in the new versions. But it was an interesting thing, because whenever you drop some papers, you'd have to sit down and check the dates on them and put them back in the right order. And in process, you just ended up reading stuff. Like I found this one summer, they had a lunch social at the square, and 5 of my named cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents, I have no idea, 5 of them were locked up for public disorderly, for being drunk in public, because apparently they were using a baseball bat to knock, for some reason, some cans had come up bad from a canner. That we had a big cannery over here right outside of town, and there was a bunch of bad cans from the cannery, and so they couldn't be sold, and so they were being given away. And apparently a bunch of these guys got a hold to them, and they took a baseball bat and were like riding around in buggies up and down the street using a big stick to knock them into people's houses for some reason. But it was all 5 of them got locked up the same night, and an unknown 6th individual that was still on the lam. There was also the story of my grandfather, who apparently had a guy try to break into his house one night, and so he shot him, and he put him on back of the truck, told him to stay there, and after breakfast he'd take him to the hospital and then to jail. And the guy was like, okay. And so there's this whole little newspaper story about how, and they were trying to badmouth him, but it didn't come across, it came across based as hell. Homie shot this guy, put him on back of the truck, right? And then he went inside and let his wife cook him a full breakfast, ate it, and then carried a little doggy bag out and tossed it to the guy on the back of the truck with some breakfast in it. And they went to town and went to the hospital. And apparently, at least according to the story, my grandfather paid for the medical bill, 2 bits, and then took the guy to jail. And they locked him up. He confessed to what he was doing, and they released him on a $4 fine for having, which, was significant in that time. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah, small town, right? You go digging through stuff and find a bunch of family history you didn't know about. Great aunts and uncles and stuff. But then again, my father had 6 sisters and his father had 6 sisters. Chances are I'm related to you. All right. So that's been the whole show, folks. I appreciate y'all coming through and doing this whole thing. I'm sure there's somebody else out there live right now that you'd just love to go over and hug and give a big old wet kiss to, because we like supporting our creators. That's what we do. That's the whole purpose of this whole shenanigans. Good Guy Audits is live if anybody's interested. Oh, no, don't do that. Do it right. That's what she said. The Shade Master of Live, I'm not going to mention who that was, but he was a previous guest on the channel before they mute him. Yeah, no, actually, my grandfather had 6 sisters. Hold on. Yeah, no, he had 6 sisters and like 9 half-sisters. Something like that. His father got married 3 times because his first wife died of typhoid. The second wife died of some type of flu. And as I remember, the third wife was buried with him. And one of them folks, and I'm not sure which, one of them, after burying 2 wives, decided he didn't want to marry anybody from the South. In fact, he went to St. Louis, and this is way back in the family history, like way back. He went to St. Louis and bought a Native American woman, and on the bill of sale that he had paid for this woman, he sold her to herself, rendering her a free woman for the price of a single kiss when he chooses. She agreed, put her chop on it, and he demanded it on their wedding day. And they had 14 kids. So, like, and most of them were daughters. Daughters are, my only biological child is a daughter. My brother's second daughter has, I think, 9 kids. I've got like 15 nieces and nephews or so. And I got a single kid that's my own. I had to adopt others to try to compete. But hey, mine are multicolored. He can't say that. All right, folks, that's been the show. Y'all have a lovely evening. Anybody wants to pop in, y'all can. Hey, I see y'all. We'll be watching something interesting, I'm sure. I'm out.